Hi, Simon Dixon, CEO and founder of banktothefuture.com. I'm here today with a very special guest who's come all the way from the States. Where have you come from?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Well, I'm here with Ellen Brown, who wrote a book, Web of Debt. And we're going to get some insights into what her perspectives on banking is. So, Ellen, firstly, thank you very much for coming here today.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ellen, I think it's always interesting to find out a little bit behind the person and what actually drove them to be interested in reforming money and banking and those things. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to actually find and be involved in banking reform?
I'm actually a writer and an attorney, and I've written 11 books, but my earlier books were on alternative healthcare, and so I got active in the alternative healthcare movement, which is quite a bit like the money reform movement now, and it had the same sort of conflicts and issues and attempts to get a whole grassroots movement going among different viewpoints. I got involved in a lawsuit for a cancer therapist who was arrested he had a cancer therapy in Tijuana, and he wound up in jail, and so I was on his legal team. And in the course of that, well, when he showed this movie to all his patients called A Cure for All Cancers by Ed Griffin, who also wrote the book A Creature from Jekyll Island. He showed that the pharmaceutical cartel, which until then I was considering the enemy or the thing that we were trying to overcome, that had the power, where they got their power was that they were also the money cartel. In other words, it goes back to the 19th century robber barons. The Rockefeller cartel had owned the banks and created money, and with this money were able to fund their the cancer industry as well. So that's when I realized that if you were going to solve any of these problems, the money was the real issue, that where it was really one large cartel, and where they got their power was they had the power to create money. I actually sort of knew that. I mean, I had started to write about that in my youth, but I just couldn't follow through, because at that time you only had libraries as your resources, and you just couldn't find the books or the answers to you would start formulating a theory and the answer just wouldn't be there. But then with the internet, all of a sudden there was this explosion of information, and it was suddenly possible to pursue any theory that popped into your head. You could just formulate that as an answer, and the internet would tell you, would come up with all the research to support it. So I just realized that this was such an interesting issue that I spent 6 years writing Web of Debt, which is that book there. Mm-hmm. And then when we had the banking collapse of 2007, then I rushed into print. So I did it by print on demand. So 2 weeks after those two Bear Stearns hedge funds collapsed, I was in print. Wow. And then I started writing articles. I started out about 2 a month and getting in them, and in different. That's another thing about the internet. Now, all the gatekeepers are gone, and so if you're just a good writer with a good subject, you can get posted on various websites, and you can get out there.
Okay, so you were effectively you started writing this book 6 years before the financial crisis. Around about 2001. Around about then. Mm-hmm. And what were you forecasting a collapse in the book? Or?
Yeah. And I was afraid it would collapse before I got done, and so it was like no, I'm not ready yet. And then when it hit, I go, okay, I'm rushing to print.
Sure. Okay, so tell me, why a researcher who comes from a very different background, how come you can forecast a financial crisis 6 years before it happened when almost all of the mainstream economists didn't see it coming?
Well, I'm really just a researcher. And as a lawyer, I'm a researcher, so I'm really trained in research. So that's what I did. I just read and read and read. And there are a lot of, maybe formal economists didn't see it coming, but many people saw it coming in the alternative media. And so I just read all that and put it all together.
Okay, so tell us about this whole alternative media. What are they seeing that mainstream economists aren't seeing?
Well, it was largely the whole gold bug group. You know,
Yeah.
Le Metropole Cafe had some great articles. And
When you say gold bug, you mean the people that believe money should be backed by gold?
yeah, which I don't necessarily agree with, although I do think gold is a good investment, and I did have, I mean, I still have gold investments, and so I follow that. But actually, what prompted me to write was when I discovered that The Wizard of Oz was written as a monetary allegory in the 1890s, and that just gave me a hook. You know, that was a storyline because really what I wanted to do was to take a very complicated subject that most people avoid because they think, I'll just leave that to the economists, which is what the economists want you to do, or what the politicians want you to do, or the bankers, or whoever it is in control. It appears to me that they've purposely made this into a more difficult subject than it needs to be. So that was my goal, to make it simple. In fact, my first introduction said, this subject has been made much too complicated, and I'm going to write it in under 100 pages. Well, of course, I wound up in over 500 pages, not because it was so complicated, but because it was so interesting.
Yeah.
The ramifications. Once you have this new sort of lens that you're looking through, and when you see it totally differently, then you start applying the lens all around the world, and you think, now, so what happened in China, and what happened in India, and what, it just throws a different light on everything. I mean, you have to rewrite history for your own, through this different lens. So
Yeah.
that's what I wound up doing. But it was all strung on the storyline of The Wizard of Oz, and that what we have going here is, first of all, there's two themes in The Wizard of Oz. One is and everybody in the U.S., of course, is familiar with this story. It's the most popular American fairy tale.
In the UK, we watch that as well. Yeah, I'm sure most people watching this video will have seen that. And was that really about debt and banking?
Yeah, well, it was prompted by, there was a money reform movement of the 1890s, and the first movement was a greenbacker movement. So there was this rather remarkable newsworthy event where there was the first ever march on Washington. They marched all the way from Ohio to Washington, D.C.